All right, hello and welcome. Today I need your help. We're going to be detectives and try to solve a really, really big mystery.
And that mystery is this: why is there a war in Ukraine? Now, that might sound like a simple question, right? But it's actually super complicated. You see, depending on who you ask, you're going to hear two totally different stories about how the whole thing began.
So, to figure this out, we need to look at the clues. And for us, the clues are these two main stories. It's like we have two different trails to follow, and they lead to completely different places. Let's see what they are.
Okay, so check this out. On one side, Story 1 says the war kicked off way back in 2014 when Russia took land from Ukraine. But then Story 2 says it's not about that. It's about Russia feeling threatened by a big group of countries called NATO. I mean, how can both of these be the reason? It's pretty confusing, right? Let's dig into that first story.
So, Story 1. This one says that the big invasion everyone saw in the news in 2022, well, that wasn't the beginning at all. Nope. It was more like the next big chapter in a conflict that had been going on for a long, long time.
And take a look at this timeline. This is some of our most important evidence right here. You can see it all starts way before 2022. There were protests back in 2013. Then, in February 2014, Russia took over a part of Ukraine called Crimea. And just a few months later, real fighting broke out in another area called Donbass. So yeah, things were definitely not peaceful for a very long time. In fact, if you ask the Ukrainian government, they'll tell you the exact day the war started. For them, it's not a mystery at all. They say it began on February 20th, 2014. That's a full 8 years before the invasion that most of the world was watching.
And we're not talking about a small fight here. Look at this number, 14,000. That's how many people were killed in the fighting between 2014 and the beginning of 2022. 14,000. That just goes to show you how serious this was from the get-go. A really crucial clue for Story 1.
All right, let's switch gears. Let's look at our second clue, Story 2. And this one paints a totally different picture. It's not about a date on a calendar, it's about a feeling of being worried and maybe even a little scared.
Okay, so to get this story, first we need to talk about something called NATO. What is it? Well, imagine a big club for countries. And the number one rule of this club is, if someone attacks one of us, they attack all of us. We all protect each other. It's basically a giant defense team.
So here's what happened. After this big standoff called the Cold War, the NATO club started getting bigger. And over the years, a bunch of countries really close to Russia joined up. Now, Russia started looking around and saying, hey, wait a minute. It feels like this big, powerful defense club is setting up right on our doorstep. They felt like it was a threat to their safety.
And listen to this quote from Russia's leader, Vladimir Putin. He said, "They promised us that NATO would not move 1 inch to the east. They cheated us." Now, historians argue about whether that promise was actually made, but that's almost beside the point. The really important thing here is that Russia's leaders believed it was. They felt like they'd been lied to.
So, flash forward to 2022. When Russia invaded, these are the reasons they gave to the world. They said they needed to stop the threat from NATO, they needed to, quote, demilitarize Ukraine, and they needed to protect Russian-speaking people there. All of these reasons, you see, come from that feeling of being threatened we just talked about.
Okay, detectives, let's pause for a second. We've got two completely different stories here. Story 1 points to a war starting in 2014. Story 2 points to this growing fear about NATO. So, how can both of these stories be about the same war? It seems impossible, right?
Well, it all comes down to one really important word, perspective. It's all about the way you see things. Think about it like this. You and a friend look up at the same cloud. You see a spaceship, but your friend sees a turtle. The cloud didn't change, right? But your perspective did. That's exactly what's happening here. This chart shows it perfectly. Take the event of NATO getting bigger. From the perspective of Ukraine and the West, it's simple. Countries should be free to join any club they want for their own safety. But from Russia's perspective, they see a threatening army getting closer and closer to their home. See? Same event, two totally opposite ways of looking at it.
Okay, so we've looked at both stories. We get that it's about perspective. But why does any of this matter? Why is it so important for us to understand both sides of the story?
Well, it's because understanding the news and understanding why finding peace is so incredibly hard is crucial. Think about it like trying to build a puzzle. If one person has a picture of a castle on their box and the other person has a picture of a jungle, they're never going to be able to put the pieces together. They're working on two different puzzles.
That's why this is so tough.
So, what did we find out today in our investigation? First, there's no simple, easy reason for this war. It's complicated. We learned about Story 1, which says it all began with Russia's actions in 2014. And we learned about Story 2, which says it's all about Russia's fears about NATO. And we learned that the reason these two stories are so different is that one big word, perspective.
And that leaves us with one last, really big question to think about. The point of this wasn't to decide who's right or who's wrong. It was to understand. So think about this. If two sides remember the past in completely different ways, how can they ever agree on what to do in the future? It's a tough question for sure, but it's a really important one. Thanks for helping me investigate today.